Welcome back to a live reading of The Effigy of Love, as written by Tony Sherblom and read by Juha Hankela. This is Chapter 1, A Hint of Magic, Amidst the Mundane. Sneaking away to the serene pond, tucked deep in the forest, far from Castle Brightford's reach, had always felt like stepping into another world. Not because of the giddy feeling in the pit of the stomach children get from doing something mischievous. No, those feelings had long since passed, seeing as Endrik had already turned 18 last winter. What made these trips otherworldly was the stark contrast between the mundane life at the Grey Castle and the seemingly magical life around the pond. Every sound, sight and smell made the world seem more vivid, more alive. Truly, it was like stepping straight into a fairy tale. At first glance, it was a world that seemed full of nothing, but contained an infinite amount of everything, if only one took the time to bask in it. Boring though it might seem, Endrik loved sitting on the glade, mingling with the lichen on the rocks at the edge of the crystal clear pond, and surrounding himself with serenity and stillness. He loved watching the water lilies with their abundance of insects skittering between them, as well as the frogs, swiftly flicking their sticky tongues at said insects. Grim as it may seem, such behavior was not cruelty. It was the circle of life, a thing he needed to be reminded of from time to time. He loved listening to the symphonies the birds sang high in the seemingly ever-verdant crowns of the trees, as if they sang just for his amusement. He loved filling his lungs with the smell of life floating in on the wind, especially during the summer when the flowers filled the glade with the sweetest of scents, a sharp contrast to the smoke-filled dry air he was used to. Indeed, he was in love with the life surrounding the pond, and how could he not be? Compared to the grey, foggy and lifeless life at the castle, this glade was heaven on earth, a vibrant clearing touched by God himself. Here, splendid beauty, not violent rot, surrounded and embraced him. Even more than embraced him. Yes, looking at his reflection in the pond, Endrik's dull, grey eyes seemed to suck in the colors of the forest and fill him with beauty, a beauty he sorely wished he could carry with him back home. Alas, it was fleeting, and meant to be enjoyed then and there only. Though it was but a small glade, roughly the size of his bedchamber, with the pond taken up half of the space in the middle, to Endrik it was the most beautiful place he had ever known, with its equal found only in fairy tales he scarce recalled. It saddened him that he could not remember them in detail, only that he had loved them as a child. All the magic and the beauty, the heroism and the bravery, the escape from the mundane they had afforded him, if only for a brief moment before they too were torn away from him. Before he even knew it, he was already 5 years old, big enough to finally start reading, learning, and pulling his own weight. Indeed, he would never forget his 5th birthday, when Grethelin, his mother, with eyes grayer than the sky, had ordered all of his favorite books burned in the courtyard, turning all his dreams of colors and means of escape into a pile of ash, slowly scattering with the wind like the distant memories they had now become. All the beautiful colors, lost in an inferno his mother had ordered. He still remembered her harsh words, echoing in his chambers as the fire lapped at the things he loved the most. It would be most unbecoming of a young man, especially one of your heritage, to waste your time on such frivolous things as fairy tales. We'll find you something better to read than those dreary old stories, lest they take root in your brain and start rotting you from the inside out. Alas, the harshest lessons are often the ones most quickly learned, especially reinforced by the cruelty around him. And learning one's lesson quickly was what one wanted Endrik would soon enough discover, as he started his transitional journey from boy to man in Castle Brightford. Putting down his pen and closing his journal, Hendrik looked dreamily over the pond. He hated bringing such ugly thoughts to the pond, but it could not be helped. It was the only place where he could process them and let them out, lest they stain his heart and soul. Luckily, the pond did not mind. It always gnawed away the grey, bit by bit, and left him with a peaceful mind, its beauty untainted by his ugly thoughts. Hendrik took a deep breath and held it until it prayed to be released. Slowly letting it out, he felt he could not be happier where he sat. He soaked in the verdancy of the summery glade, basked in the harmonious birdsong all around him, let his soul float easily as his mind was finally empty. Free, if only for a moment before the minister's bell tolled, and the grey, droning echo would erase the tranquillity, beckoning to him to leave all that was beautiful behind him once and crawl back to the heavy, grey burden that was the reality. Not yet. There was still time to enjoy the present moment. The comforting thought was that there was beauty to be found somewhere in the world, even if it was only made manifest inside one's mind for a brief moment, until the words, "the end," were reached, or the time to part had come. Alas, that is the purpose of stories, a fleeting beauty, a momentary reprieve for the soul. Surely nothing like it existed in the real world, nor ever had. How could it? It was laughable to even imagine it with the things as they were in the world. The sky could never reveal its true colors, for the clouds never parted. The smell of flowers could never drift on the wind, for the stench of ammonia and smoke would always overpower it. The hero could never slay the dragon and save the princess, for there were no heroes, only dragons, untamed, cruel, and walking on two legs. Enjoy the moment, please stop thinking. Though Hendrik was basking in all the smells, sounds, and visions of the summery glade, the grey started souring his thoughts and darkening his heart. It was a taint he could never quite escape from, no matter where he turned or what he did. Though he still sat there, on top of his usual rock, he started missing the glade and the feeling it instilled within him. He started missing the fairy tales he would never get to read again. But what Hendrik missed the most, though he had never felt it nor seen it, probably never would, was the mystical thing called love. A concept so perplexing and out of this grey world that he could not wrap his head around it no matter how he tried, and tried he had, over and over again, while shrouded in secrecy in his own chambers. He had read about this mystical thing that so beguiled him, yet no matter where he looked, nor how much he read, he was left with more questions than answers. What is love? Where is it found? How can I obtain it? He knew that from fairy tales that the dragon-slaying knights seemingly always found it before the end. It was their purpose and drive in life. In other stories, non-fictional ones so vividly depicted they always made him blush. Love was sometimes deemed as transient, fleeting, yet still something people had fought for. More recent scriptures ignore the subject wholly. Thus Hendrik was forever doomed to be shrouded in ignorance. But surely the concept itself had to be rooted in reality. All stories were supposedly based on someone or something that had existed. Olden kings and kingdoms, princesses from lands far, far away. Better not let these thoughts rot my brain. Hendrik sighed as he looked at the sky, the sun making its last stand against the mass of grey clouds before letting dusk take over. Then it came. The distant echo of the minister's bell reached his ears and made his guts wrench. Swift as a fox, as he rose to his feet on the moss-covered stone, but something made his whole body tense up and his eyes widen. A creature of previously unimaginable beauty, rivaling any and all paintings he had ever witnessed, had revealed itself at the other end of the pond. Someone or something, purer, more innocent in its presence, and more colorful than words could describe, stood there, half of her body hidden behind the great oak. It was an alluring entity, green eyes so deep one could dive into them and never reach the bottom, a golden aura radiating more warmth and comfort than the dawn of a summer day. Her aura seeped into Hendrik's whole being and filled him up as he gasped, staggered, and ultimately fell right into the pond, making the insects scatter into the shadows as the lily pads bobbed rhythmically on the surface. Those thoughts, not surviving the dip or the repercussions this tumble would have, were the first that crossed Hendrik's mind as he made a quick resurfacing. Gasping for air, he swept his wet, black curls from his eyes and clambered back onto the rock. Embarrassed by his blunder in front of whoever he had seen, he threw wild glances around him. But it was not only embarrassment that flushed his cheeks red and made his heart jump. No, the scene had stirred within young Hendrik something unfamiliar. A new, strange feeling swirled in the pit of his stomach, as if he had swallowed a mouthful of insects while falling into the pond. It was an unusual feeling that silently called out to whoever he had seen as he hoped to find her and meet her. Alas, only the memory of her pale angular face, framed by glistening white hair covering her shoulder and hiding her bare breast, and her bright green eyes, remained seared into his memory. Eyes so deep and clear, Hendrik wanted to drink from them and fill himself up with her. But that was not to be. The last toll of the bell died out, and the agonizing silence jerked Hendrik from his reverie. Damned be this mess I'm in. He frowned as he wrung his sleeves dry. His frilled white shirt and black breeches were clinging to him like bark on a tree, making him cringe at the cold embrace they afforded him in the darkening evening. Yet this time, the annoyance and fear had to fight to make their presence felt, as the strange, new feeling within his bosom would not fade. It was strong and persistent. Like a swinging pendulum, her warmth filled him up and washed everything away, only for the night's cold embrace and fear of what was to come when he returned to the castle in this state, to make his skin prickle with goosebumps. Over and over again, these feelings swirled like a torrent within him, waging a war inside of Hendrik he had never experienced before. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why are you here? Where did you go? What did you do to me? Picking up his leather-bound journal, Hendrik cried out to the creature, but was afforded no reply. Dashing over the roots and rocks towards home, he cried out to her again and again, but only the rustling leaves of the wind replied a bittersweet farewell. Truly desperate, or hopeful beyond belief, Hendrik prayed, God, if you're listening, please let us meet again, somewhere, somehow. Reaching the ford outside the castle, Hendrik stopped to brush off the worst of the moss and whatever algae was still clinging to him. The grey lay ahead, and though he knew it would not welcome him with open arms, he hoped no one would notice the state his clothes were in. Taking one last deep breath of fresh air before diving into the grey, he peered into the forest, desperate to meet her eyes, those twin green stars, that enchanting beauty that haunted him all the way to the castle. Yet there was no one there.